Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Orphan Last, aka Skylar Madison, and today I'm going to be drawing an image that has a dead cat in it, and I wound up using a dead cat as a reference. So if you are hypersensitive towards that sort of thing, then maybe this particular video is not for you. But yeah, of course I want my videos to have kind of a mass appeal and everything like that, but if you find yourself hyper sensitive to that sort of thing, this video might not be for you. But yeah, I'm starting out the video making a perspective grid inside of Affinity Designer, and this is actually a fairly unique perspective grid. It's quite a bit different than my normal perspective grid, and so I've actually decided to save this perspective grid for, I guess, use later on down the road if I ever feel the need to use it. It's just something that kind of gave me a little bit of different options than what I normally have. The image that I'm drawing is at the same sorts of dimensions as a comic book page. Normally when I draw an image, the image is, you know, 1920 by 1080. Sometimes in order to increase the pixels per inch, sometimes it's bigger than that, keeping the same dimensions. But I wanted to have something that was kind of formatted to work for a comic book, if I so chose. Basically, I've been kind of I've been participating in this community that has this writing prompt, this weekly writing prompt. I struggle with writing a cohesive story, and so I've been actually following along with their writing prompts, kind of at whatever free time that I happen to have, and usually it's just like in the last few moments of the week, I'm just kind of like scrambling together to get something together, and yeah, but even still, like even with what I have been struggling with, I feel as though I'm kind of coming up with a more cohesive story than I've ever come up with before in the past. And so this image relates to that story. However, the issue is that, like, after I finish writing this particular story, I don't think I'm going to be working on the comic book, like drawing it, anytime soon. There's just a little bit too many controversial bits to the story than I would like for my first project to be. And if I ever jump into controversy, I would actually want to have a big enough audience to where I would have at least a good number of people having my back, to where people feel as though they know enough about me to where whatever controversy I might step into, people will know that where I'm actually coming from, instead of just, you know, something out of the blue, and it's just super hyper controversial, and people don't know enough about me to really know what I think, and so people assume. I don't want that situation to pop up. So it's kind of weird with this image. Like I said, the image is kind of formatted to be more like for a comic book page, but you know, the pencil work that I was working with, for some reason the pencil brush was never really quite behaving the way that I wanted it to. And so, since it wasn't kind of like, I wound up replacing the nib on my stylus. I think that may have been at least a small bit of the problem. So yeah, but before that, like, I wound up drawing the whole sketch for this image, and I was just kind of never able to get the sketch to look the way that I kind of wanted it to look. I am kind of happy with how it's all coming together in its own way, because you know, I admire in some people's work, especially in something like Jack Kirby's work, how a lot of things are impressionistic, and yet you actually know what it is that he's drawn, and you can't usually, when, at least in the more modern history and stuff like that, when someone goes impressionistic, like, the image is just nonsense. But like when Jack Kirby did it, it was actually kind of admirable, and to some extent, where you could understand what it is. The character's pose, the human being, his pose is very impressionistic and more emotive than it is like a practical sort of pose. And I've been kind of tossing around ideas in my head, like if I were to make a comic book, would I want it to be like super accurate and realistic, or would I want it to have more of a cartoony feel so that I could get through one page to the next, to the next, to the next? That way it has this super like hyper stylistic look to where regardless of the fact that I'm moving through one image to the next really quickly, it'll still have some sort of mass appeal because it has this very different, unique look to it. And I'm still kind of undecided on that, to be honest. But I don't know, since like if I were to work on a comic book, my first comic book doesn't necessarily have to reflect what the entire body of work would have to be for every comic book that I'd be working on. So that it's fine. It's just something that I'm kind of throwing around in my head. Now, a bunch of months ago, I said that I've been kind of avoiding cross-hatching, and some of the reason is because I was working with Affinity Designer and Affinity Photo, and in Affinity Designer you can pull it off, but like every time that I was working inside of Affinity Photo, it never quite looked right. But ever since I got Clip Studio Paint, it seemed like the cross-hatching looked about as accurate as it would with pencil and paper. So I've kind of decided, okay, well, yeah, you know, in the past I've been kind of hesitant to jump into cross-hatching because it hasn't looked right, but like I kind of want to learn how to do it a little bit better. And you know, there's kind of like, if I may be able to kind of coin my own terms a little bit, there's like two types of cross-hatching. There's like old historical cross-hatching, where it's like everything, like 90% of everything is cross-hatched, and it's obvious that the work, like it actually looks like an image that would be found in an old tomb or tome, basically an ancient book, and like 99% of it has been cross-hatched, and possibly took the artist like a couple months to get every single cross-hatch onto each and every single image. That is really admirable in its own way, but with comic book art, even with the more detailed images and the work of the masters, where they have just tons and tons of cross-hatching, it's still not even remotely close to the same amount of cross-hatching that you would normally find inside of the old, you know, bound tombs, or tomes, basically, with cross-hatching and such like that. And so I kind of want to nail down the more minimalistic sort of style, and also I kind of want to, like, there's other artists out there like Jim Lee and stuff that have more of a liberalized sort of style where they use it quite a bit more. But you know, there's Will Eisner. Will Eisner, he wrote a book, Comics and Sequential Art. It's a book that I've kind of been flipping through here and there. He's known for writing, well, actually, drawing the Spirit comic books from way back when. I really like his artwork, and whenever he does cross-hatching, it's usually pretty minimalistic, and I really like it. Even if the image is designed to be in a nighttime setting, the cross-hatching still winds up being fairly minimalistic, which again, it's fascinating. It's interesting to look at. When bouncing around on YouTube looking for tutorials on how to cross-hatch, most of the time it just seems like the information isn't really that helpful, and I don't know, maybe eventually I might be able to master it and might be able to give people my 2 cents on the topic. I don't know, it all depends. Some things are just learned. Some things you just have to learn for yourself, and there's just only so much that somebody can verbally say or visually show and describe, And so, like, I don't know, it all depends on how things work out. One of the thoughts that kept popping through my head while working on this image was like the cleanliness of lines and such like that. Like, I've had a number of people this week specifically show me pictures that they've been working on, and they're good images and all that, but like some people's artwork, it's like what they basically they're aiming towards making the cleanest lines, the smoothest lines, and yet even still their images aren't coming out the way that they want them to be. And really, if you look at this image right here, there are parts of the image where my line work, like my inking work, isn't like super smooth or anything like that. Having smooth lines does not mean that your image is going to be better. Yes, you are using lines in order to draw the picture. However, you are not trying to, like, the lines are not the goal. The goal, like the whole reason why you're using the lines to begin with, is to create a three-dimensional effect. And if you have failed to make the three-dimensional effect, it doesn't matter how craggly and it doesn't matter how smooth your lines are, nothing is going to be able to help your image look better if you have failed to make the three-dimensional effect. Okay, so please keep that in mind. That might be able to help some of you guys out. Like, if a lot of the time, what I've been noticing with some of the images that people have been sending me, kind of sort of asking me for advice, make sure you have a reference. Like, if you do not understand the pose, or if you're not coming out with the right three-dimensional effect, you need a reference. And there's, you know, Clip Studio Paint, for example, you're able to actually pose a three-dimensional, like, posable mannequin and use that as a reference if you need to. Or if you have to, go onto YouTube and look up a whole bunch of action scenes inside of movies until you finally see somebody get into a pose that you want to draw, and draw from that. Pause it and then get a screenshot of that image and draw from that. And be as loyal as you possibly can to that reference image. Sometimes the only way that you're going to get better is by learning from real life. And that's just the fact of the matter. And that may sound boring, but the thing is that you're trying to emulate real life, and if you have no idea what real life looks like because you're never drawing from real life, then your pictures are never going to look right. I mean, it sounds like common sense when I say it, but then there's some people out there that kind of just, oh, okay, I guess that does make sense or something. I don't know. Just try what you can to make the image look right, I guess, by using as many references as possible. In this particular image, the only thing that I felt like I needed a reference for was the dead cat. And even then, I kind of felt like, well, you know, I wish I had a better reference for the cat, but I'm still able to just kind of figure things out even still after that, I guess. Just simply because I've drawn so many different scenes in the past. Here I was kind of getting a little bit frustrated while drawing this picture because I'm so used to working with Affinity Photo and Affinity Designer. I'm used to having a lot more tools than what Clip Studio Paint has with text. And so I just had to kind of manually do a whole bunch of crap that I didn't want to do, especially with the text there. And you know, I've been kind of saying in recent months that I really want to do something with my lines. I want to improve how my lines look in the final image. And I feel like I've kind of gotten to the point to where, especially in this image, where I've kind of nailed something down. Now, by the end of the video, I still haven't finished the image. I actually spent the time that would normally be spent finishing off the image, tinkering around with my line work and trying to make sure that it looked good. But I think it was time well spent, because I actually colored my line work, and that came out looking pretty good, actually. So, you know, you can see me, like, as you watch me working, you can see me kind of experimenting with cross-hatching all the way through the whole process. You see me kind of taking one approach and not liking it, and taking a different approach, and then not liking it and taking a different approach. And sometimes I take up to like 5 or 6 different tries to try to get it to look the way that I want it to look. But yeah, pretty soon here you're going to see me actually working on coloring my line work, and I think it's interesting what I come up with. I wish I had more to talk about with regards to the actual cross-hatching process, but there's just, right now there's not much to talk about, because most of the process is just confusing to me. So basically all I really did is I just kind of set I don't know, I think I just set a layer to a blending mode and just started to color it, and clipped that layer to the line work, and I just started coloring the line work. The only problem with this is that since I don't have any flats down, I don't have any concept of how the lighting in the scene is, it doesn't seem to work out. So next time around I think that I'll lay down my flats and then start messing around with the color of my line work, because a lot of the coloring work for my lines were really sloppy. And not only that, but I also kind of felt like it was just a lot of the coloring work that I did with the line work was just inaccurate, especially after I laid down all of my flats. And you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. I started picking out colors that seem to harmonize with the color of the line work. And then as time develops, as I start putting in more and more flats, it became harder and harder for me to try to harmonize the colors with the line work, and so I had to kind of recolor the line work a second time. And yeah, here I'm like you can see me just kind of laying down the flats. Just, you know, here I'm just doing the sidewalk right here, and then I work on the yeah, right here I work on the sky. I kept tinkering with the gradient, and I kept going back, actually. Even after this, I go back and play around with the sky. But here I'm just laying down the flats for the grass, and I think it comes out looking pretty good when I do that. But yeah, so then after I'm done with the grass, I go ahead and lay down the flats for the building. But you'll see that in just a moment. And basically, if you're paying attention, you can see that I'm basically laying down my flats for the biggest objects first. So the man inside of the image is just one solid color, just one flat single solid color. The cat is one flat single color. The grass in the background, one flat single color. But here with the building, I set a color for the building, and then, you know, the awning, I go ahead and set a color for that. And then, you know, there's this sign, okay? Well, now I'm kind of working my way down to smaller and smaller things. Now that I have, like, the biggest objects with a laid down flat. And so that's basically how things are working out here. I also kind of, the way that I colored the line work, I got the objects off in the distance to be fading to kind of a gray. I kind of feel like, you know, a grayish blue would have possibly made it look better, even like better than what I've currently got. And I think I might just tinker with that a little bit in the next video, and see how that works out. I like how everything is coming together. I just kind of feel like I want to tinker with things and try to get things, like, this is the first time in a long time where I've kind of felt like, hey, you know what? I've been wanting to kind of tinker around with how my line work looks, and this is kind of more so in the direction that I've wanted to go with my line work than any other approach that I've had in a long time. And so I think I've actually I've struck gold, I guess, with this image to some extent with how I want my line work to look. I mean, I started out with black and then later on just started to color my line work. But here, right here, I'm setting up to lay down my flats for his suit. And it's when I lay down the flats for his suit, especially, that the colored line work really doesn't seem to gel well with the image at all. And so it's like, okay, well, I'll have to rework the coloring for the line work, and I'm not really quite sure when I decided to tackle that, but actually I think I'm doing it right now, actually. But yeah, reflected light, I decided to put a little bit of green on his face, just simply because, you know, there's going to be some reflected light from the grass behind him. And some of the coloring work that I did earlier just kind of went a little bit too erratic, and so I kind of cleaned it up a little bit more, and then kind of occasionally it's kind of weird because I kept bouncing back and forth to refining the coloring of my line work to laying down my flats. So it's not like I was just having a one-track mind throughout this process. It was just whatever needed to be done at that point in time, and I kept on, you know, you'll see me, like, if you're paying attention to where I'm looking at any given point in time, I'm looking at things, like a bunch of different things. Even if I'm not really editing or changing anything, I'm just making sure everything is working as one cohesive whole. Just kind of policing everything all at once. And so I'm kind of bouncing around quite a bit. And nothing wrong with that. I do kind of, I don't know, laying down your flats. I'm kind of curious with all of you guys out there. How often do you guys leave a completely new layer for each and every single flat? Do you guys do that? Because I mean, I've been doing that with Affinity Designer and a little bit with Affinity Photo, but I don't think that's entirely necessary, to be honest. I don't think you necessarily have to do that. But yeah. So here, this cloud is the last flat that I felt like I needed to do. If I need to lay down more, then I'll figure out what I have to do there. But yeah, the final image is coming up on the screen right now, and you can kind of see how things are kind of coming together. Since this is formatted to work for a comic book, I kind of have to zoom out to where the image isn't adjusted to, you know, the size of the camera, or at least the computer screen and stuff. But this is where I am so far. I think it's looking all right. We'll see how it goes. Anyways, guys, that pretty much concludes it for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And if you guys would like to get more notifications from me and participate with my community, feel free to join my Discord. A link to my Discord is in the video description below. And if you guys would like to support my channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the upper right corner of the screen right now. It has an image of my mascot. And if you've enjoyed this content and would like to see more, feel free to click on anything else that's appearing on the screen right now.